My name is Chris Diggs. I'm the Director for the Municipal Utilities and Engineering Department. Thanks for coming out today. Several years ago, or a few years ago, we started a project to rehabilitate 2/3 of the city's streets. We've put forth a tremendous amount of effort, and so far we've done quite a bit of work. And the reason we're presenting this item today is because we'll be starting yet another project towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. So let me tell you some of the details as to how we got here and what we've done thus far. So there was two phases. In 2012, we started the PMP, which is the Pavement Management Program. And through that, what we did was we basically looked at all of our streets to analyze the conditions of the streets and categorize them to figure out what was needed to rehabilitate those streets. Later, in July 17th of 2012, Council approved the Paris program, which was basically funding the PMP. So there were some funding sources that are being used to fund the Paris program. First is Measure I. The second is water and sewer utilities. There were a couple of different mechanisms that were used. One of them for a large portion of funding was prior to 2007, patches that were done within the city streets, or I should say leaks that would occur, there was never a permanent patch. And so we went through an exhaustive effort to determine what patches had needed to be permanently patched, where those were, and what the value of those were. And from that, then we determined that value and basically moved those funds from the water utility to the Paris program. And that allowed us to extend the Paris program and allow all of those patches to be permanently addressed. We did that with water and sewer. We also had the water and sewer as far as the damage of the vehicles that drive around on the streets every day, addition to solid waste. And then finally, there was some utility coordination where we're working with Edison and the gas company and other utilities so that they can do their projects concurrently when we're doing our projects. So historically, you can see on the bottom there, we were typically spending a little over $1 million a year on paving. The program here, you can see we've got about $5 million per year that will be invested into the Paris program. So as I'd mentioned, the utilities, our city utilities, water, wastewater, and solid waste, have had big, heavy vehicles. And those big, heavy vehicles cause a lot of damage. I think people would be surprised to learn as to how much damage a solid waste vehicle, for example, causes in comparison to a standard residential passenger car. Passenger car is just one passenger car's worth of damage. One trip of a solid waste vehicle is equivalent to 10,000 passenger cars traveling on a street. So you can figure 10,000 trips per vehicle. You've got 3 per week because you've got three different trash cans that are picked up. That's 30,000 trips per residential street per week. And so that causes a tremendous amount of damage to those streets. They're basically skinny little streets, and you put 30,000 vehicles over them per week. That obviously causes a significant amount of damage. And so this program, part of what we were doing is to recover the damages, the cost of those damages, and move those monies to the Paris program so that we can basically reverse that damage and repair all of the streets. And so here's, again, just a breakdown. And when we looked at the solid waste vehicles and the water and wastewater, we were looking at roughly 40% of the damage caused to those streets was caused by the city's vehicles. So a little bit about our streets in the city here. We've got 640 lane miles of streets. Here's the breakdown of those streets. And something that might surprise some of you is the actual amount of miles that are driven in Redlands every single day is over 814,000 miles per day. That's a lot of miles. And so obviously our effort is to reverse that damage. So the first portion that I mentioned was the pavement management program. Part of that was determining the pavement's condition. And it's basically done on this PCI, and as you can see, it's from 0 to 100. And so to kind of give you an idea as to where the city stood at that time, we had the Redlands Street average was 53. The county's average was 70. and a statewide average was 66. So you can see we were certainly the bottom of the barrel there of the three, the state, the county, and the city. And you'll see when we get towards the end here, we're significantly better than that today. Here's just an idea of what each one of those numbers represents, what you might see. Here's a 53, where you can see we refer to this, that broken up section, refer to that as alligatoring. 66, which is a little bit better. You can see you've got some cracks going pretty much all the way across the street, but it isn't quite as beat up as the alligator portion. And there's just another couple of examples of a PCI of 70 and a PCI of 90. And so the part of what the Paris program was intended to do was to restore the condition of the street and do it as economically as possible. And so when you look at the pavement's life cycle, you kind of have three stages. The first stage here lasts a long time. This is a brand new street, and then it takes some time. You can see approximately 14, 15 years that street remains in its current condition, which is pretty good. And then it comes to a point where the life starts to degrade. And then, obviously, after it's gone to degrade, it pretty much flattens out here. We're flattening out on the bottom portion there is because, well, once you hit a pretty much beat-up, cobbled road, it's pretty much harder to get worse than a dirt road, we can say. So what our objectives was to prevent the condition of the street from going from one section to the next section and from this section down. And why is that? Because it's significantly more expensive to rehabilitate a street in this portion here, or even more so in the lower portion here. So we can see just coming up with some guesstimates on the numbers here. We've got $2 to $5 a square yard for replacement here, 8 to 12 down here, and then 20 to 36 on the bottom. 20 to 36, that's basically a full remove and reconstruct. We're tearing all the road out and replacing it. And so that's what we want to avoid doing. And so you can see here is when we go from this one here, if we allow the condition of the street to fall from here to here, there's a cost associated with that. And so by not allowing it to go in there, we're saving about $6 to $9.50 a square yard. And the same in this one here, when we can prevent it from going down into the lower section, we'll save about $16 to $24 a square yard. That's the objective. Now, what we've heard, especially when we first started the Paris program 3 years ago, was, well, my street is worse than that guy's street. Why is mine not being addressed and theirs is? Well, quite simply because if your street is down here in red, it can't get any worse. And if it can't get any worse, the reality is there's nothing for us to save. And so what we want to do is your neighbors, in the example, who wasn't as bad, that's correct. His isn't as bad. And if we fix yours, later his would fall into the condition of yours, and we have no savings. So the objective is to fix the one that's not quite as bad, bring it up and restore it to this condition here, where now we have a lot of life left over. If we simply looked at the worst streets, there would be no savings in the long haul. That's the impetus of what this whole program is about. Yes, ma'am.
Because my eyes are back, can you give me the prices again for the price
Sure.
per square yard on the three segments? Thanks.
Sure. She's asking for the cost again, $2 to $2.50 a square yard, $8 to $12 a square yard, and $20 to $36 a square yard. So when you're already at $20 to $36, it doesn't get any worse than that. And so those aren't the ones that we're necessarily looking for. So here's this is a graph showing the cost of, or where the PCI would be based on the funding levels that we have. So under the blue portion here, that was basically what we were doing in the past. And as you can see, every year, as the years go on, we were at the 53, and you can see we dropped down to a 30 PCI in 10 years. With the $5.6 million per year that we have available to Paris, we would see a slight increase, and then at 10 years, we're basically where we are currently today. However, what we did with Paris is we basically leveraged these dollars. And so the council authorized two sets of fundings. One is we sold some bonds, and the second was we got a $6 million loan from the state. And what that did is we infused the program with roughly $45 million worth of paving, again, to prevent, wrong way. There we go. To prevent this from occurring. So by grabbing these streets and moving them up, that's what has allowed us to do this here. Okay? So, again, with the Paris funding, we're seeing our PCI increase. And Mike, our PCI today is?
Close to 80.
Close to 80. And, well, that's where we are, close to 80 there. So part of the PMP, the first portion of this whole program, was determining which streets we were going to address, how we were going to go about doing that. And we, staff presented this item to council and they had approved it. And basically that gave us the roadmap from that day going forward as to how we were going to decide which streets were going to be paved. And so we came up with this matrix method. And the method basically looks at 11 different items, and these items were given a weight. And based on those items and the weight, that determines which street is to be replaced. And so you can see one of the large portions there, it was E-Road, which was basically we looked at every single stretch of street and determined its condition. The next large item there was ADT, average daily trips. And so that carries a tremendous weight to it. Why is that? Well, if we've got, dear old grandpa that lives at the end of this cul-de-sac, and he's the only guy that drives up and down this street every day, and his is the most beat up street. Well, some would say it's in the worst condition, we should be addressing that street. Well, matrix method says, but he's the only guy that's driving down that street, so each week perhaps that gets 5 trips. But when we look at a street like Redlands Boulevard that might get 15,000 trips per day, it really makes sense to fix the street that has 15,000 trips versus 5 trips. The benefit for the investment is significantly greater when we pave streets that have a higher frequency of cars driving on them. And that's why that carries so much weight. So you can see the other items, populations, schools, street types, et cetera, all of the different items there, down to the bottom, which is rail stops. So the method in which, adding to that matrix method there, we look at, now actually, I should back up here. Now that we've determined which streets we're going to fix, now it's how are we going to fix them? And it certainly wasn't anecdotal. We spent a pretty significant effort into determining from a scientific perspective, what are we going to do to every street, okay? And one of the things that we used was this falling weight deflectometer. And so basically we pound it on the ground and that sends an energy wave. And measuring that energy wave determines what's the density of the ground beneath the asphalt. That density basically gives us the strength of the street. Knowing what type of street it is and what types of loads we can expect to see on it, the types of vehicles, if it's a truck route, if it's residential, the frequency of vehicles, that tells us basically how sturdy, how thick does that street need to be. And how sturdy and thick is it now? And so from there we can say, okay, what additional treatments do we need to add to that street to accommodate its use? Okay? As you can see here, we analyze the soil. You can see there. And then, I'm sorry, 223 additional corings that were done. So then we drilled a hole in the street to actually get a sieve analysis to get our eyeballs on the street, not just from the falling weight deflectometer, to put our eyes on it, see what is currently there, and then between the two, then we can actually make a design for the actual street. So there's 3 basic types of treatments that we're providing. The first is slurring, which is basically we're taking a emulsion and we're spreading it across the street. Sometimes it might look like we painted the street. And what we're doing there is we're filling in all of those fine cracks, crevices, so that we don't have water penetrating through those and eroding away the soil beneath the asphalt. There's several different types of soil. The second one you can see mill and overlay, or what we sometimes refer to as grind and overlay, where if the street section below the asphalt is in good condition, We've pounded on it with our falling weight deflectometer. We found that the actual structural section is sound. Then we can simply grind a portion off of the top, bring new asphalt on, and apply that to that surface so we have a new smooth surface. One of the questions we're asked frequently on that one is well, it doesn't ride as smooth as another street. It still has that waviness in it. Well, that's correct, because it was just a grind and overlay. So the waviness that you might have found in the street is going to exist afterwards on a grind and overlay. We're not changing the profile of the street. We're simply grinding a couple of tenths off of it and putting new asphalt on top of it. Same thing with a slurry. The profile of the street does not change. In front of the high school and just east of the high school, we had some, hey, well, this street doesn't look as good as that street. That was correct. That was a slurry. It wasn't a grind and overlay or a pulverization. Pulverization, which is our final treatment technique, which is basically we're taking the street itself, the asphalt itself, grinding it up into small pieces, mixing it into the soil to create that bridge, basically that structural portion of the street. Sometimes we'll add cement into it. Redlands, being red because of its clay soil, on the south side has a lot of clays in it. The clays are horrible for a structural section. So we have to add a lot of cement into that to make that section more structurally sound. And so basically those are the three types: slurry, grind and overlay, and pulverization. And so here is an idea of a street. This is over by the university where you can see you've got a lot of patches. The street's kind of beat up. This is prior to pulverization. You can see we've got a single pass of the pulverizer here. It's slightly elevated because they've grinded the street up, mixed it into the soil a little bit. They've just done a single pass. You can see it's heavily alligatored here. The alligatoring is not because of the asphalt. It has nothing to do with the asphalt. It's the structural section below the asphalt that has completely failed. The asphalt isn't providing much structural integrity to the street. There are sections where we have streets that are only 1.5 inches thick of the asphalt, but the structural section could be going well over a foot below the asphalt. Yes?
Is that because of the clay over there?
That could have been because of the clay. It could have been, there's a whole number of things that it could have been. So here's another section where now they've got the entire street pulverized. Once it's pulverized, this is where the actual profile of the street changes, where it actually will ride smoother, where you might have had some dips and things of that nature before. With pulverization, we're changing the profile of the street from both directions. See, now here it's completely pulverized. They've run a grader up and down. They've applied a lot of water to it. That's one of the items that we hear a lot about is we're in a drought. Why are you supplying, putting all this water on the streets? You cannot get good compaction without water. It takes a lot of water to get all those gravels and sands and silts and things of that nature to come together to create that structural section. And this one here, we're actually putting in the Portland cement. And so this was, as I'd said, with sometimes with the clay sections, it's horrible for trying to make a structural section here, so we're adding a lot of cement in there. That's what's going on in here. And then second to last step here is the paving is completed. And then finally the striping goes on very last. This is Redlands, Alabama here. The grind and overlay is pretty simple. You can see that we've ground the street off on this portion right here. You can see slightly elevated section here. And we've got the asphalt, new asphalt being applied. And then finally a slurry is a kind of a close-up shot here where you can see very thin section right here. Again, we're not looking to make the street any stronger or anything of that nature. It's more of a preventative maintenance. Something like slurry should be done every, say, 7 to 10 years so we can fill all of those voids and kind of freshen up the asphalt so that it can extend the life. So how are we doing? Well, we're starting our 4th year, and that's why we're here. Starting our 4th year of the program. We've done 205 lane miles of streets thus far. We've got 640, and we promised to the council that we would do a little over 400. So you can see so far, we've gone a little over halfway. Some of you might say, well, you said it was going to be $45 million that we were going to leverage out of this program, and we spent $31 million on half of it. So wouldn't that be $62 million? Not the case, because the streets that we have remaining in the Paris program are the lesser expensive streets for the most part. We'll be doing a lot more grind and overlay and a lot more slurry, so there'll be more miles being done per $1 million on the remainder of the project. Again, that's all determined based on the PMP and the matrix method and all those other things I already mentioned. So the project that is currently underway, they're doing some potholing, but you'll really see the heavy-duty stuff happening towards the beginning of the year in January. That's a $9 million contract, and we're doing 115 lane miles. And as Mike mentioned, we're at 80. This will put us at least an 83. And we believe we will be reaching our goal to the council, which was 2/3 of all the city streets in a 5-year period. So here's the next phase of the Paris program, and it is behind you there. The different colors are representative of the different techniques or treatment techniques that each of the streets will be receiving. One of the things to note is that there is no street that's being repaved with a steel pipeline in it. We learned a lesson on Brookside, where when we paved Brookside, we looked, of course, at all the infrastructure in the street. That had an old steel main in it. However, it had the leak history on it was pretty good. It had a couple leaks on it, but it was really not a problem. Once we went through it and start applying all that energy to the ground, we've got these big, heavy equipment, and we're grinding, there's a lot of vibrations and things of that nature, it caused that pipe to just fail endlessly. And so we had to go in and pull that pipe out, put another piece of pipe in, and repave the street. So that was the black eye that we got on that one, but that was a lesson learned. Since that time, we have not repaved any streets with a steel pipeline in it, regardless of its leak history. We learned our lesson on that one. With the exception of maybe some little sections here, a 20-foot section here, a 10-foot section here that we're unaware of, that the map might not show correctly because the pipe has been in there for 100 years. No streets are being resurfaced with steel pipelines in them. And so that causes us to juggle a little bit. Maybe a street that would be done this year gets pushed to next year, and so another street gets moved around. But it only does a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 years of movement, and that would be about all. So for the most part, if you're seeing a pipeline going in your street, in your neighborhood, you're probably going to be getting a full street resurfacing. So here's the map here. There's a couple of dotted sections that are underneath that, and those are the sections with steel mains that are going to be replaced concurrently with the street resurfacing. So lots of ways to get a hold of us. Obviously, you all know this because you're here, or you're here with us at home. But Treasurer Ortiz, she's basically our social media guru. She's been putting a lot of effort into this, as has the other staff. So there's many, many ways to reach us, and that's what I have. So any questions? Steve?
The other third that are not in the Paris program now, is there a plan for that? And does it follow that those are all in the completely failed section of the curve?
Okay, the question is the remaining third, because we promised to the council 2/3. What happens with the remaining third, and are those the worst streets? The streets are all ranked based on the PMP and that matrix method, and that is available on our website. So if you're curious where your street ranks, you can certainly go on our website and find it. The remaining third of streets will be done, but at a slower rate, because again, we leveraged the dollars that we had. We had a little over $5 million a year that we showed there. And so with the loans that we have, we're using a lot of that $5 million annually to pay those loans. So we have, say, $1.5 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, dollars each year on a going forward basis until the loans are paid off. Once the loans are paid off, then we have the full $5 million a year again. So you will see, again, we front-loaded the Paris program because, again, we want to address the streets before they fall into the next category down, more expensive treatment. So we've leveraged those dollars. We're front-loading that to doing the 2/3, and once that's paid off, we'll address all of the remaining streets. Correct. Andy.
Excuse me. You mentioned Brookside. The surface of Brookside now is already starting to fail again. It's alligatoring and it's developing ruts in the vehicle track there. Is that because the contractor cheated on the mix or didn't compact, or Can you give us some
Sure.
insight to that?
So the question was Brookside, there's some cracking in Brookside. Why is that there? And was it the contractor's fault? No. With a grind and overlay, you can pretty much count on the cracking that you're seeing. Those cracks are going to resurface about a year per inch. That is the 1 inch of thickness. 1 year later, you're going to see that crack show up again. Now, imagine if you have 2 cakes. So you say you're going to make a really big cake, and you take 2 sheets, and you put them right up next to each other, and then you put the frosting over the entire cake. Next day, you come back, the frosting's a little more brittle. So now you pick up that cake on that sheet, and you kind of wiggle it around a little bit. What happens? You see the crack where the 2 cakes were just put together, correct? That is exactly what's occurring in the street. If you don't get in and mix up that subgrade below the asphalt and create a homogeneous cake, you're going to see those cracks transfer up through the asphalt. Absolutely going to happen.
But Brookside's going to fall back into those lower numbers sooner because it's a street that gets heavy traffic. So grind and resurface is kind of a short-term fix on a street of that type.
Well, the cracking, though, that you're seeing in Brookside is pretty insignificant to the one that you saw in the one that was completely alligator. So, yes, there's cracking. So, I guess to answer the question, yes, we could do a complete polarization, make a homogeneous zone, like I just said, over all the city streets. And we'd get about 100 miles of streets done, and we'd be done. So the better option that we've chosen was let's address the street on a street-by-street basis based on the following weight defectometer, based on the corings, based on that information that we have, do what's best available to us now to leverage these dollars, and then maybe come back and do a slurry to fill those cracks in. Because the crack itself isn't necessarily a problem with drivability. The problems with the cracking is that's an opportunity for water to get in there and cause more consolidation or washing out of the soil itself. Correct. It accelerates it. So what we want to do is every 7 years or so, get back in there and slurry it, fill those cracks in to prevent that migration of water back into the street. It's far more economical to do it that way.
And triage.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Orange Street, that resurfaced is beautiful, and things like that, and somebody comes along and starts tearing it all up. And the people that's tearing it up is not making it level, they're making it rough. Whoever you're hiring to come in, contractors, is not fix that street like it's supposed.
Okay, so are you referring to the gas company's work?
I don't know who done the work.
The recent work that's...
Beautiful, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is on Orange, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, on Orange, the gas company went in there and tore the street up. It looked beautiful before, and now it looks horrible. That was an emergency work by the gas company. I don't know if you remember maybe 6 months ago where there was an evacuation because the gas pipe failed. They'd done extensive research into that batch of pipeline, and they made the determination that that piece needed to be replaced in its entirety. Now, we have monthly coordination meetings with all of the utilities that are located within the city of Redlands. We provide them the maps over and over and over so they can see what streets we're going down, when we're going to get there, so that they can get in there and do that work. However, this was a bit of an anomaly because, again, like I said, they determined that that batch wasn't going to last as long as it should have lasted. And therefore, they got in there and replaced it. Now, they will be required to replace that street at a half width where they had put holes on the one side and do restriping. There are other sections where they've got to replace the entire street. They also are required to replace it with the same type of asphalt we used on that street, which was a rubberized asphalt. And so they are required to replace that just like it was. The same thing over here on State Street, same type of thing. They are going to be required to replace it from a half width.
It looks like they're done, but by being done, it's not perfect. It's not like it was.
Well, you're right on your first part. It looks like they're done.
Yeah.
They're not done.
Because when you go over it,
Correct.
it's bad.
They will be making it to at least the way it was before.
Well, that's good.
Okay. Yes.
When you're doing repairs, and you said water's an important part of the compaction, we see all the trucks come through, is the city able to access gray water for that? Do you have to use fresh water? What's our source during?
Okay, so gray water is water that comes out of your washing machine, say. No.
And we don't have those pipes, right?
Well, correct. We don't have those
So
pipes.
you don't have access.
We have sewer pipes and water pipes and non-potable water pipes. The non-potable water, we use it when it's available. Other than that, in certain sections, it could be drinking water. But it's important to remember if it's non-potable, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's recycled water. It could be contaminated well water. And
Which is fine. I'm just curious whether I was using the wrong word, the non-potable water, so that it's not coming off of our,
it's still coming out of your same aquifer, though. Let's not forget that.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to say, in regards to that, I am a certified California naturalist, and I want to point out that the water that's used to compact the roads is still going back into the watershed. The worst problem we have is where everything's covered in cement and the water gets bad and runs down into the open sea. So we are getting it back just very slowly. But any water that goes into dirt and soaks in is a good thing. They call that groundwater recharge. So people use that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Shoot.
You said that if there's steel pipe, it's going to be delayed by a couple of years. Will it?
No. I said if.
Can they do roads that have steel pipe under them?
Okay, so good question. If it has a steel pipe in it, that pipe will be replaced prior to paving.
Okay.
Now, there might be a shift, and because we've got to coordinate the utilities budget and the utility projects with the paving budget and the paving projects. So there have been instances where this street was going to be paved this year, but yet it's got a steel pipe in it, and that steel pipe's going to be replaced next year, so we just did the paving the following year. So sometimes they get pushed up, sometimes they get pushed back. That can go both ways. Typically about 1 year shift is all it gets.
So my second question, I think you might have just answered. We're going to have my number might be wrong, but I want to say about 80 miles of water infrastructure pipe upgrade. Is all of that, has all of that lane mileage been set aside and have the streets not been upgraded for everything that is scheduled
No.
to be?
Everything, we put a lot of pipeline in the ground, and everything that was slated to be paved has been paved. And so some of the pipes have been expedited to make sure that we accommodate that for Paris.
So everything that still needs to be upgraded is in an
Pipes?
unrepaired street?
Say that again?
All of the water infrastructure pipes that are scheduled to be upgraded are on streets that have not yet been repaved?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, with the exception of slurry. So, for the most part, it's going to be grind and overlay or pulverization. Well, those are the only three. Or pulverization. We will not do one of those treatments on a street that has a steel pipeline in it. If it's a slurry treatment, that is not an invasive process, and therefore we will go ahead and resurface it with a slurry if it has an old steel pipe. Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir.
What about alleyways? There's a lot of alleyways in Redlands. Are those on the list at all?
Alleyways are not on the list.
Or like easements? Or because I know like between Fern and right up there on Fern, there's like apartment complexes and they have an alleyway right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually where I live. I'm just kind of curious because the trash guys come through and it's terrible.
Yeah, some alleys are privately owned, some are public right of way, but alleys are not included in the Paris program.
Can we petition for patches at least? Or?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, if it's the city's alley and there is work that needs to be done, certainly you can always put a work order into the quality of life, and they should address that for you.
I feel like sometimes the more rundown it is, the more trouble seems to go down in an alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? If you clean it up a little bit, it just looks.
Totally agree. Broken window concept.
Yeah.
Yep. Any more questions?
Before we go and do that, just pitch for our social media.
Okay. Then let me give this to you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you, Chris, so much. You're super awesome for that. I want everybody to, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, Instagram. All of our project details are on our city's website. We are on Snapchat. We're coming up with our own filter to where when we come and work on your street during this upcoming Paris project, we want you guys outside with this filter taking a picture. It's called City of Redlands Capital Improvement Project on my street. So we can promote it. We know where we're at, and the community can see that we're out there. So it's something fun we want to do with you guys, and we'll be starting that next year. A lot of our, as you guys know, you're on our Facebook, We film everything, and we also put it on our YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, so that you can play back videos, watch things again, kind of get a feel for what we're doing. Next door is huge. I believe some of you are on there. We've had a lot of replying back and forth. This is where we will be sending information to specific neighborhoods that will have the paving, because we don't want to bombard everybody with, hey, we're coming down your street. But get on this app. It is only for residents of Redlands per neighborhood. So you're not going to see anything happening in Loma Linda, but you also better connect with your Redlands. It helps in a lot of ways. And our last one is Waze, and this is a traffic app. We now have the ability to put down real-time closures. When we are coming and we are shutting down 1 lanes, 2 lanes to get you around the detours that are happening through the city, this is going to be your best friend. Not only that, it's preemptive all throughout the United States. It's huge, and you guys should really be on it, because it will tell you everything. It'll even tell you where there's a cop. So it's a great app. And we have little flyers. Take them with you if you need help. If anybody in the community wants help downloading these apps, getting to understand them, come in there and I will help you. There's 70,000 of you, and I like Christmas cards, so we can all be friends. But yeah, so we totally appreciate you. Thank you for your outreach, and really appreciate you guys following us on Facebook and everything else. So, thanks.